What's up YouTube? Today I want to go through the process of creating a Bitwig device from scratch using the grid. So I want to go through my concept all the way through to the finished product. You don't always have to start with a concept with this kind of thing. Sometimes just experimenting in the grid or any other type of modular platform can result in happy accidents. However, having a concept is a really nice way of being able to achieve something, because one example may be we have all these plugins installed, but we want to do something very specific and we don't know which plugin can offer that, or maybe some of those plugins don't even offer it whatsoever. So being able to kind of achieve something that you know you want to do based on a concept is a very powerful thing. So I want to talk about that a little bit in this video. So do you love reverbs? I love reverbs. I'm pretty sure everybody loves reverbs. It's one of the most popular tools in audio engineering, apart from obviously like EQs and compressors and that kind of thing. I think across the board in almost every genre and every sort of archetype within music, people appreciate reverbs. The odd thing is we haven't seen any synths with a reverb, in the synth engine. I don't mean, as an afterthought, make a sound and just sprinkle some reverb at the end. Imagine if the reverb was part of the sound generation. I actually had this brainwave last night while messing around with some stuff on the modular synth and patched around with some reverbs before or like in the voice, and had some really cool results. So I thought, I wanted to explore how we could do this in the software realm. Obviously, with software VSTs, sometimes we're a little bit limited. The only things I could really achieve it with are stuff like phase plant, where you can, stack up as many effects as you want and modulate the effects after the filters and that kind of thing. So you're able to get some very similar things. However, it got me thinking I should create a device in Bitwig's grid, so it's just much simpler to use. It's a kind of dedicated instrument designed around this kind of idea that I have for creating pads and atmospheres and that kind of thing. But, imagine being able to have control over envelopes of reverbs and that kind of thing, and being able to filter certain elements in the reverb chain. Like, for example, imagine having the oscillator feeding into the early reflections part of the reverb, and then only the envelopes and the amp modules and stuff after that, so that you kind of get this shimmered, smeared kind of sound coming straight out of the oscillator. And I think that way you're able to create these more textured and kind of atmospheric or cinematic sounds. And I think that's the idea with this device that I want to create today. Anyway, enough blabbering. I've actually come up with this pretty silly diagram. I don't know if you guys can see that very well. Of the routing. I think that's going to kind of help us move forward a little bit more methodically in this process. So anyway, let's jump into Bitwig and let's have a look at what we're talking about today. So I think first thing we can do is we can just add in a polygrid straight off the bat, because I'm going to try and do as much as the sound design within a single instance of polygrid and create an instrument that can kind of do everything that we needed to do without any external processing. So straight off the bat, when we add a polygrid, it does come pre-wired with a couple of modules. So these we can keep intact for now. What I want to do though is I want to set this over to a sine. Just, start a little bit simpler with just a sine wave. Yeah, what we can do is we can actually I'm going to add a riffer, and let's just get this to generate us a MIDI. So one thing I like to do in the grid is to use these comments or labels blocks to create a methodical building blocks system that we can use to route everything. So for example, let's just say here we can call this, let's just say generator. And then I want to feed the generator into what we can call like the shimmer, early reflections. And then from there, we're going to go into some envelopes. We can do like envelopes and filters and all that kind of thing here. Envelopes and filters. And then here, then we do like the big reverb tails. Reverb tails. And maybe we can do some like extra processing at the end. Maybe some delays, choruses, and that kind of thing. So we can just call this extra effects. And then what we can do is we can have like a final mix down. So it helps to kind of work slightly backwards with these kinds of things, like I said, to have an idea of what you want to achieve in the end, because then, for example, here we know we're going to have a mixer, and from there we can start deducing, like, maybe we want dry signal directly from the oscillator. Maybe we want to be able to patch in certain things directly to the output, as well as each of the individual sections, which I think is a pretty powerful sound design thing. So straight off the bat, what we can do is we can put in a mixer over here. And so here it's already automatically sent the inputs from the ADSR, which is not necessarily what we want. We actually want the input directly from the oscillator. And it's going to be playing at all times, which is not necessarily what we want. So let's just turn that off for now. But having the dry is going to be pretty helpful in terms of, debugging and that kind of thing. So I'm just going to leave it there. And then what we can do is we can assign this one to the next input and so on and so forth. So for example, then we could have, this will be like the shimmer output. And then we can have big reverb tails output, extra effects output, and we can kind of mix it all to create kind of different patches, I guess. Okay, so we got the basic building blocks. Let's start building our reverb algorithm. So I'm going to give props to Venus Theory for this one, because I actually got this from his channel. He did a video on building custom reverbs in the grid, which is an incredible video. It's really, really good. And I've actually used that idea to rebuild some of my other, like, similar ideas to some of my other favorite reverb plugins, and I've kind of learned a lot in the process, For example, if you check out the GitHub page for Cloudseed, they've actually got the signal flow diagram, so you can actually use that to rebuild something that sounds quite similar. So anyway, a lot of the reverb sound is built around all-pass filters, which are essentially just like simple delays. So what we want to do is we actually want to stack these up so that we have like multiple of them in a chain, and each one has a slightly different time setting, and each one kind of smears the sound more and more down the chain. So this you kind of use to create what's called a diffusion network, and that is the basis of the reverb sound, is these kind of networks of all-pass filters. So let's just fine-tune some of these settings so that they're all a little bit different. So then let's send this before this ADSR. So with these kinds of patches, this low pass and high pass are going to become your best friend, because these are a nice way of confining the frequencies so that they don't, for example, clip or anything like that. Okay, so we've created a kind of shimmery thing. We can still go back in here and fine-tune this a little bit more. Let's actually create a system which this one ADSR can create a VCA for two channels. One channel which is going to be the shimmer, and another channel which is going to be the dry. Reason I'm doing that is because we want to be able to mix that dry in. So let's put an attenuator over here. Let's turn this off and turn this down. And then we can set this to modulate this. And now it's essentially done the same thing. So now what we can do is then just put another attenuator onto this signal over here and get this to modulate that, and then turn it down. And then we've set up a dual VCA for that. We can perhaps also use a chorus over here to create a little bit more of a shimmery effect. So let's just patch this in between here. Oh, that's nice. Okay, let's start looking at the big reverb tail. So how we create this is essentially a similar concept to this, with the network of all-pass diffusions. But what we want to do is we also want to create a feedback network. So let's just copy-paste this entire thing. And a little trick that I like to do is to actually split this into two, so that we can do like mid-side processing or left-right processing and certain things like that to kind of create an even wider effect on the big reverb tails. So let's put in one of these stereo split modules over here. Let's patch out from the ER, or earlier reflections, from that amp envelope. And then let's split this mids to the top layer and sides to the bottom layer. And then with this one, we can actually tune all of these slightly differently, so that now we have slightly different parameters on these diffusions between the left and the right channel, or sorry, between the mid and the side channel, but also between the early reflections and the late reflections, or big reverb tails. We also need a merge that can merge the mid side after this. And just for now, let's send this to the mixer over here. So to create feedback, we're going to need a long delay, and we put this over here, and then we're going to need an attenuator. Attenuator and a sum module. So let's just turn that to 0 for now, because we don't want to just blow something. And a sum module. So what you do is you split the output from where you want to feedback, attenuate into the sum, and then duplicate whatever you want to send in. So for example, this attenuate goes into the sum as well, and then in here. And then this attenuate becomes the feedback amount. Okay, so what I wanted to do is, you know, sometimes when you're creating these big pads and you want to create like a swell, sometimes you want a reverb and then a filter, and then you end up putting like another reverb on the end of that, just to get that kind of like wide sound before the filter and then kind of echoing out, you know. And so let's create something like that that can be done, you know, directly within the synth, you know, before the extra effects, for example. Or we could do like another one of these entire little reverb chains as one of the extra effects. So we can just copy, paste this over here, and then let's send this out into a filter. Let's just say XP is pretty good because we can change the modes. We can get a little bit more experimental with that. So let's run this in here. And then let's run the output from here into the mixer. So now what we can do is, like, to debug, it'll be easier. We can just solo this part. Oh, that sounds fantastic. Okay, so what I like to do is here in the grid, I'll create macro controllers by using a value parameter and a modulator output. And what this allows you to do is basically send almost like a macro to any of the things in the patch. And then you can have like one control to do that. You could do this outside here, but I like to set it up easy beforehand, you know, and then decide which of the parameters are going to become kind of front panel macros. Do you know what I mean? Okay, so what I've done is I've added an envelope, ADSR, and then 4 of these attenuators to each of the voice outputs in the mixer, so that it kind of reacts more like an instrument and less like a reverb effect, hopefully. And then I've added an extra delay effect that taps out from before that kind of final sweep reverb effect, and then goes directly into the mixer. I think we're getting somewhere which I'm pretty happy with as a original concept or first iteration. Now we can start looking at fine-tuning things a little bit, and I want to, you know, the reason I actually kept everything in a single polygrid rather than just, you know, adding a reverb as an effect is because now we can use the really interesting system in Bitwig called voice stacking. And that's going to allow us to create, you know, MPE compatible reverbs, which could have like different sounds on each of the voices, or we could just go with something like a slightly more simple polyphonic effect, again, where we could have slightly different sounds on each of the voices. So what I want to do here is let's just remove this instance of Riffer that I had and that note length, which was just, you know, making things a little bit longer. And now we can trigger things via the MIDI. Reason being is I want to add a voice stack over here. So what this allows us to do is modulate parameters based on which voices they're being assigned to. So for example, if we go over here to Polygrid and we choose voices, let's say 5 voices. And so here, if we open up this voice stack modulator over here, you'll see here you're actually able to, you can assign values from 0 to -1 to 1, 0 to 1, ratios of the value, or you can actually manually assign them over here, which I think is really cool. Say for example, if we just use this filter value that we created, and let's set the voice stack to modulate this, right? And now what we do is we assign the voicing modulators like this. It's going to assign values different on those filters for each of those 5 voices. So if you're not following, hopefully this will outline it in the sound. So using the voice stack, if we hold down a single note, what it does is it duplicates the voice, and you can actually see their active voice is 5 out of 5. it duplicates the voice, and then it allows you to assign that parameter to different stuff in the sound. So, for example, we could, assign all sorts of different values to all of these all-pass filters to create these wide sounds. We could create different values to these pan parameters, so each of the voices is kind of stacked across the pan to create really, really wide sounds. So let's just maybe create a couple of these voice stacks. Voice stack. And what we could do is we could also use this to modulate or to assign values to different ratios of the input key. So for example, like set this to be modulated here so that we have various, almost like a chord being played. And now we can also polystack or voice stack these attack decays if we use this one that's in the modulators. So for example, we could assign different attack values to each of the voices. For example, here, let's use this one because it's ascending orders. So let's just jump in here and use this. Modulate like different attack values, different release values. So each of the voices has like a different envelope. Now we are getting somewhere. Can you hear how expressive it kind of moves around the space now? could perhaps put a filter before, like a pre-filter here, that we could use as like a tone shaper. I think that could be pretty cool. Okay, I think that's about it for the first iteration. This one I'm thinking of a cool name for this. I think we can call this instrument Event Horizon, because that's the kind of vibe it's giving me, you know, that kind of like sci-fi, cinematic kind of spacey vibes. So let's save this and we can try it out. Awesome, that's about all that we have time for today. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Let me know what you think in the comments. As always, if you haven't yet, please consider hitting that like button and subscribing to my channel. I'm going to be uploading this instrument to my Patreon for all my $5 supporters, so if you want to know what that's all about, check out the link in the description. Yes, that's about it. See you guys next time. Cheers.